All right. Hi, guys. How are you? It's Ms. Vukovic here for biology. On behalf of Mr. Sindelar and myself, we hope that you guys are doing all right. We miss you. I noticed that most of you were able to log on to Google Classroom and get everything completed for last week. So if you didn't get a chance to do that, don't start this activity until you finish that one. And always send us an email. You can send me an email or Mr. Sindelar an email, and we will both answer. Okay, so we miss you guys, and we hope that you are doing all right. All right, this week what we are going to talk about is population interactions. Last week, Mr. Sindelar went over a few words with you, so let's review those first. So Mr. Sindelar introduced you to 4 words last week. Ecology, which is the study of how organisms interact in their environment. Population is a group of the same species in the same area. And then biotic factors and abiotic factors. This week, what we want to do is pay attention to populations and their biotic relationships. Before we move forward, I want to clarify that a population has to be the same species. A lot of you, when you filled out the Google form, put that same population can be just given by an area. So it could be given by like the area of Avon or your house. But it also has to be the species. So humans in the same area are a part of the same population. My dogs at my house are in the same area, so they're a part of their own population. So make sure you're paying attention to species. What we're going to do today is talk about how different species and different organisms interact with each other in their population. And so we're going to have to imagine that we are in the coral reef. And so a lot of us are used to Ohio's Lake Erie, but we're going to pretend that we're in the ocean and that we have all these different organisms living in the ocean. We have sea turtles, we have fish, we've got coral, even little algae and microbiotic organisms, really small organisms live in the water. Ooh, here looks like a lobster. In the coral reef, there are many organisms that interact with each other every day. We're going to use this understanding of the coral reef and the ocean in this picture to talk about symbiotic relationships. In order to talk about symbiotic relationships, we have to figure out what the word symbiotic or symbiosis means. So symbiotic or symbiosis is a word that describes the interactions or relationships between two organisms in the same environment. Symbiotic, two organisms, and their relationship. So how do we interact? There are 5 types of symbiotic relationships, but we're going to cover 3. And then in order to talk about the 3 different relationships, we're going to look at whether one organism or both organisms benefit from their interactions or the relationship. If you guys take a look to the right, when you download this PowerPoint, this image has a link to an article that you should read from National Geographic to learn more. Identify. As a class, we're going to go over the 3 different types of symbiotic relationships. We're going to use the environment of the coral reef, so picture the image that I had just showed you. We're going to use that environment to come up with some examples of mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. To start, number 1 is mutualism. Mutualism is looking at 2 organisms that are different organisms living in the same environment. In a mutualism relationship or a mutual relationship, both organisms benefit from that relationship. When I say benefit, I mean that they both get something good out of it. Think about if you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you might feel happy when you're around them, and they're going to feel happy when you're around them. So that's a mutual relationship. You're both feeling good. You're getting something out of it. In nature and in the coral reef, one example is Nemo living in his anemone. So if you think about Finding Nemo, remember that Nemo and Marlin lived in an anemone, which he couldn't say, and I'm not sure I can either. But when he lived there, he was the only type of fish that could actually go in the anemone. So Nemo and Marlin are the only fish that can live there, and the anemone gets something from them living there as well. They get protection, and the anemone gets something too. If you download this PowerPoint, you can click on this image to watch a video that explains how. But mutualism means that organism 1 and organism 2, they both benefit. So they're both happy. Both benefit, both happy. Our second type of symbiotic relationship is commensalism. Commensalism is looking at the relationship between two organisms, but in this case, only one of the organisms actually benefits from this. Only one of the organisms gets something good. The other just experiences no harm. So really the other one isn't getting hurt, but it's also not getting anything good. One example of this is a scientist that found jellyfish living like really close to shore. And he was able to view the jellyfish and found that there were tiny fish, like tiny minnow-like fish and little organisms living inside of the tentacles of the jellyfish. Because they were living there, they had protection from any predators. But the jellyfish didn't get anything from it. The jellyfish just offered up a home, didn't get anything from having the fish living there. That's an example of commensalism. So for commensalism, organism 1 is going to benefit, but organism 2 doesn't experience anything. So nothing good happens for organism 2. Our third type of symbiotic relationship is one called parasitism. This is a relationship between two organisms, but in this relationship, two different organisms interact. One benefits and the other experiences harm. So usually what happens is that one organism actually ends up living in the other, and it feeds on the other organism and causes harm and eventually death. So if you look at the example to the right, this is another video that you can click on the link to. And this video has a fish that has a bunch of parasites that live in its teeth. So parasites live in the teeth here, and they eat away at the fish's skin. And so it's eating away at the fish, and then that fish is eventually going to die if those parasites continue to grow. So for this example, organism 1, if that's the parasite, that's going to definitely benefit. But organism 2 is going to experience harm, and that's going to eventually end up causing death, right? So parasitism, it's when one organism usually gets like food and nutrition from the other, and it causes the other to die. Pretty gross. All right, so we're going to practice. I want you guys to know that there's a Google form on Google Classroom, and it's broken down into 3 levels. Level 1 is identifying what the 3 words mean: mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. Level 2 is identifying examples. So you would want to read the article back on the Symbiosis page. You would want to watch the videos and come up with examples. Level 3 is what we're going to go over as a class together. Level 3 is harder. It's looking at scenarios and identifying them as either mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism relationships. You do not have to get to level 3. Do what you feel confident in, do what you feel capable of, but don't be afraid to challenge yourself. Right, so this is the worksheet for level 3. It says that you should read each scenario below. First, indicate which kind of symbiotic interaction is being described. Write a P for parasitism, an M for mutualism, and a C for commensalism. Be prepared to explain your reasoning for your choices. Don't worry about that. So in order to identify what kind of relationship we're looking at, we have to identify the two types of organisms in the relationship. Then we have to figure out, does organism 1 benefit? Does organism 2 benefit? And we can figure out what relationship we're looking at from there. So let's do number 1. Some shrimp and crab live and capture food from within the tentacles of the giant anemones. So for here, shrimp and crab are organism 1, and giant anemones are organism 2. Let's find out if organisms 1 benefit. It says that they live and capture food from the tentacles. So they get a place to live, which is a benefit, and they capture food, which is also a benefit. So we know that organism 1 benefits. Organism 2 are the giant anemones, and it doesn't say anything about that. So we're going to assume that the organism 2 remains unchanged. This example is one of commensalism. Commensalism is our only type of symbiotic relationship where one organism benefits and the other doesn't. So I put a C next to number 1. Number 2, a pearlfish spends the day inside an alimentary tract or intestines of a sea cucumber. The fish emerges from the sea cucumber at night to feed on small crustacean. The pearlfish gets a safe place to live. The sea cucumber does not gain anything from the relationship, nor is it harmed. Perfect. So, if we look here, it says the pearlfish gets a safe place to live. Pearlfish is organism 1, and it gets something good. The sea cucumber does not gain anything from the relationship, nor is it harmed. So that remains unchanged. Just like the example number 1, when you have one organism that benefits and one organism that remains unharmed, you are going to have a commensalism relationship. All right, you guys. So what I want you to be able to do is go back to slide 3 or 4 and make sure you read the article that's attached from National Geographic. From there, flip through the slideshow and watch the videos to learn something new about each of the types of relationships. Last thing, I want you to be able to go onto Google Classroom and fill out the form. Try to get to level 3. But if you can't, if it's too hard, don't worry. Just don't be afraid of a challenge. All right? I miss you guys so much, and I have so many funny stories to tell you about my dogs and my cats and just life in general. If you guys have anything that you want to share with us, there is a spot on Google Forms for you to catch us up on what's going on in your lives. We miss you so much, and I hope that this video finds you well.